Welcome back, everyone. This is Griot of the Diaspora, and I am your host, Nakaira G. And today we are going to talk about the secondhand clothing epidemic here in Africa and how you can combat it. Let's talk about it. Okay, so recently I wrote an article about secondhand clothing in Africa, and I've noticed that there have been a few different headlines coming out recently about Rwanda as well as Burkina Faso making bans against secondhand clothing. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, let me give you a really quick breakdown. So basically, when fast fashion, secondhand clothing, whatever the case may be, when that stuff is thrown away, whether you physically as a consumer throw it away, or when big corporations or big factories, when they get rid of their clothing, a lot of times they don't recycle it. And so what happens is they end up selling it to these different vendors, or they end up shipping it to these different African countries as well as South American countries, and even in India as well. And so what happens is that a lot of these clothes end up being literally just dumped at the shores of these different countries. It's still kind of like almost a mystery how these clothes are just ending up on the shores of these different countries. Obviously, they're getting there by boats. Obviously, they're getting there by some type of customs or border protection. And there's obviously some type of bribes and negotiations that are going on. But besides that, what's happening is it is polluting a lot of the beach areas and the landfills, right? So particularly here in Ghana, they have an issue where there are certain beaches that are being bombarded with piles and piles and piles, like thousands of tons of clothing that just wash up ashore. And then it also forces these different countries to have to be responsible for the waste of it, to get rid of it. Okay. In a lot of these countries, particularly the South American countries, but really Africa is really affected by this because there are not a lot of factories and there are not a lot of recycling manufacturers here in this country, especially, as well as other countries on the continent. Real quick, y'all, make sure you download my new ebook. It is a travel planner and journal. I made this about a year and a half ago, and it's really cool. There are 10 different entries. So as you are on your travel journeys, make sure you download this ebook. It's only $10, and you can get it on my website today at nakedgoldonline.com. You can download it, you can print it, whatever works for you. Make sure you cop that today. So what happens is now Africans are forced to have to figure out what they're going to do with all of this extra clothing. And so if you've ever been to Ghana, or if you've never been to Ghana, you know that the secondhand clothing market is the larger share of the fashion and clothing market here. So when you are driving down the street or walking down the street, you will often see hundreds and hundreds of different vendors who have secondhand clothing for sale, right? And if you ever thought about where is this stuff coming from? A lot of this stuff is coming from it being dumped at the shore, or it being sent here by the gay lords or by the belles, and it's really alarming because when you go to these different markets like Makola or Kaneshi or Jamestown, or wherever, when you go to these different markets, you will see, they also call it thrift store because that's what it's called in the West. And so they also say, oh, this is the thrift store, but back in 2013, when I first came to Ghana, it was called dead white man's clothing. right? And that's kind of like what the like community calls it, it's dead white man's clothing. The idea that, when people die or whatever the case may be, that's what it seemed like it was. But when you do more research on this topic, you end up finding out that it's more than just dead people's clothing. It's actually corporations who are a part of this. I want to give you another example. I used to work at Goodwill corporate offices, and they also have a strategy where the things that don't sell in the Goodwill store after a certain amount of days, usually after about a month, they sell all of that stuff. And there are vendors who will come and they will buy those things. It can be toys, it can be books, it can be clothing most of the time. And they will sell those things by the Gaylords. And then those vendors will then take those Gaylords and ship them to these different countries in Africa or in South America. And so even thrift stores are a part of the problem. And so I've seen a lot of different organizations over the years do their best to try to combat this, but it looks like it's still just getting worse and worse.
Do you want to learn any Ghanaian language online? Do you want to know more about your culture as a Ghanaian? Then we've got you covered at Ghana Lingo. We teach Fanti, Chi, Ga, Dangme, Over, Dagmani, Ahanta, Gunja, and many more.
And so in my recent article, I talk about what has been happening in recent years. So here's just a little bit of information. As of 2024, an average of 15 million pieces of secondhand clothing is imported to Ghana annually. And this corporate waste has devastated many aspects of the world's most beautiful coastal cities. The issue facing Ghana, as well as other underdeveloped countries affected by Western colonialism, can be attributed to the lack of technological facilities or the overhaul of corporate waste that operates without an efficient system of recycling or economic sustainability. And so there are different organizations like the Oris Present, as well as Greenpeace, that have been here in Ghana for a few years, several years, trying to combat this issue. And it doesn't seem like there has been any progress, in my opinion. Now, the Oris Present, they do different things where they take donations and they give money to people at the different markets. But it seems like one thing that a lot of people can agree on is that the corporate waste has to stop. That's number one, right? But then the Oris Present has also made statements that there are a lot of people in the Ghanaian market who don't want that to stop, because they have now developed such a subculture and a sub-business culture that now depends on secondhand clothing waste in their country. And for many people, they feel like if they don't have that product, they will have to shift to a whole new business strategy. And this is really a conversation about poverty, and this is really a conversation about colonialism, and this is also really a conversation about the lack of infrastructure here on the continent. There have also been different activists, as well as NGO representatives that have suggested that a textile factory should be built here in Ghana to supplement ways to recycle a lot of the clothing, meaning finding ways to recycle some of the fabric, reusing the fabric, finding different ways to make use of it instead of taking all of these clothing and then reselling it. Because for the most part, most people don't want to buy thrifted clothing in Africa, right? Especially for the diaspora, when we come to Ghana and come to different parts of Africa, we mostly want to either wear our own Western clothing or we want to wear traditional fabric, So the market for the secondhand clothing in the thrift store is usually like a very, very local experience here. So I want to talk a little bit about what the Oris Present, one of the NGOs that have been here for several years in Ghana, some information about what they have recently been doing. So recently, the Oris Present posted a graphic on Instagram that stated, "We do not support a ban on secondhand clothing." And their concerns were focused on the immediate needs of the Kantamanto market community. Therefore, the always present NGO have positioned themselves on the side of Contamanto and have developed a fund account for donations to support the market vendors. Their website states the fund will redistribute funds to individuals who physically, culturally, psychologically, and financially carry the burden of big fashion's waste crisis. They will also reserve funds for community-wide crises such as a market fire, which recently happened in Contamanto, demolition, cholera outbreak, or outbreaks of sexual violence. The goals are clear for this NGO, but there's another perspective that is pushing for a ban immediately. Now, Greenpeace is another organization, and they seem to have a completely opposing view. Greenpeace is an international organization known for exploring environmental issues around the world, and Greenpeace Africa's Instagram account shared their petition, which seems to counter Always Present's position against the ban. So it seems like with Greenpeace, their demands are targeted towards the Ghana government. Their demands include to ban the import of textile dead waste immediately and call for mechanisms to make polluters and clothing companies pay for the environmental and health damages that they cause. So now we see these two international organizations are now at odds. And we see that on one side, with Always Present, they feel that they have to honor what the market vendors are saying. And there are some market vendors who are saying their livelihood depends on this thrift store business, mainly because there is such a lack of employment opportunities where they can make a certain amount of money that they need to actually survive. In a recent PBS interview by Kate O'Neill, she was asked on her position how donations from the West are inundating Ghana with toxic waste. And what Kate said was those people can't be just tossed off of their jobs. You have got to create jobs, move from a waste economy to a repair and reuse economy. And so, I feel very torn about this, right? Because as much as I understand that the market vendors who have now depended their businesses and their income on this thrift store type of business, it's kind of like the people who are hurt the most are now aiding the problem, right? Because the people who are mostly affected by this are the market vendors, as well as people who want to enjoy the beaches, as well as, people who are typically in more poor areas, because a lot of this waste comes to the beach areas. And if you know Ghana, you know that the beach areas are considered the most touristy areas, right? So now you have this kind of clash where you have, like, Ghana is very well known for its beaches not being the cleanest, right? You have a lot of issues with there being clothing waste there. You have issues of the sewages ending up there. You have a lot of just waste and plastic bags there. That's why you always see people doing beach cleanups here, right? But then you also have the issue that because of tourism, right now, it's kind of like, oh, we need to make money. We need to make Ghana look clean for the tourists, but really you need to make Ghana clean for Ghana, not just for the people that are visiting. And so it also makes me think about, why isn't there a textile factory here? There are people that are still making kente by hand. And if you've seen any videos, you can just research what the process of making kente is. Now, for a lot of diasporans, when we come to Ghana, we go take kente classes, we go take batik dyeing classes, we go take classes to have some fun. And it may seem like fun when you're doing it for just a small amount of time, but think about doing that for your livelihood in 2025. I mean, come on. It is kind of alarming that there are hotels, there are people selling houses for all this money, but there's no textile manufacturer business here. It kind of makes you think, like, do people want Africans to remain poor? Do even African governments want their own citizens to remain poor? Because why hasn't there been a textile, recycling business? There could easily be a textile manufacturing company that recycles the fabric, whether it's cotton, whether it's silk, whatever it is, that can recycle those things and remake something else that is needed in the country, right? But instead, we're just watching this corporate waste situation just pile up and pile up and pile up. And at this point, everyone's a part of it now. Consumers are a part of it without them even knowing. The corporations are a part of it because they are actively throwing away clothing. Because we all know one thing about corporations, they're not just going to give away free things. They rather just throw it away and go send it to a third world country, because even to these corporations, these clothes mean nothing to them. It still means nothing to them, especially when most of the clothes that are coming out of these fashion corporations like H&M and Nike and all that stuff. I mean, a lot of that stuff is made out of plastic and polyester and things that aren't even really valuable in the fashion industry. So it really does make you think, like, are these things intentional? Is it just that people don't want Africa to thrive? Of course, right? But when you talk about these governments, why are the governments not standing for their own people? And so recently, I think in the last week or two, some information about Burkina Faso saying that the president Ibrahim Traoré has recently banned secondhand clothing coming from America into the country. And although I think that is a beautiful, beautiful thing, there's 54 countries on this continent. And from my understanding, the only countries that have done so is Rwanda and Uganda, and now Burkina Faso. And that's just not enough. Especially with Ghana getting so much praise and doing so much with the year of return and asking for so much money from everybody. I don't understand how you have the Chinese here, you have the Lebanese here, you have the Turkish here, you have white people here, you have diasporans here, and they are building everything but things that are needed for the actual people. You have the Chinese here participating in the gold mining, participating in the bauxite mining. You have all of these other ethnic groups participating in the extraction of the natural resources of this country. But how come no one's telling them you have to build a textile recycling manufacturing business, and you have to also be a part of making sure that whatever country you come from, your government also understands how this is going to go and how much money they should be bringing into Ghana instead of just dumping their waste here. But I digress. So I want to know, what do you guys think? Do you think this is deliberate? Do you think that everyone is at fault? And what are some suggestions that you guys have? Because it seems like, some of the smartest people in the world have already given suggestions and nothing has happened. The most that you see being built here in Ghana are houses. That's really all you see. Houses, hotels, Airbnbs, real estate. But I don't really see a lot of things that are being built for the people. And I'm also seeing this phrase being used a lot on social media by Ghanaians, where they say they feel like Ghana is no longer for Ghanaians. And it's funny because I've been saying that for a long time. And it's sad and it's true, because it's like there are so many things that this country needs, and another hotel isn't one of them. Another Airbnb isn't one of them. Another $1 million house isn't one of them. This country needs factories, manufacturing plants, agricultural equipment, to make things easier so that people don't have to be performing manual labor in 2025. I just hope one day my people gonna be free. So, until next time.